The phones have fried our brains. The kids need everything spoon-fed to them.
There's no media literacy anymore.
Back in my day, movies had substance. There's countless video essays, think pieces, and online discourse about how film has been ruined by one big bad thing. But what is this thing? I'm glad you asked. You've definitely seen it before. A film has just started, or it's halfway through, or it's at the very, very end, and something is missing. You don't know something vitally important. Maybe it's a relationship history between two characters, or things that have happened before the film even started, or you need an important conflict to be explained to help you understand what's going on in the film right now. Enter exposition. But what is exposition? Why is there so much discourse about what makes it good or bad? And what does exposition have to do with neuromarketing? Why are we talking about this right now? And why is an entire generation and social media getting blamed for how major Hollywood studios are writing their scripts? Let's get into it. But first, are you a fan of deep dives into the ins and outs of what makes our world tick? Then you're in the right place. From storytelling, pop culture, science, history, current events, and maybe some politics, I like to throw a little bit of everything in the mix. I love to explore all of the contextual threads that make our world ours. All of the resources I use for my research will be listed in the source notes in the video description below. If that sounds like your jam, then don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's have respectful conversations about nuanced topics. It's the only way to make sure that you don't miss a thing, and you get to help a small YouTuber like me. First, let's define what exposition in film actually is. According to Masterclass, an online education platform that is focused on media production, exposition is the insertion of essential background information like character backstories, setting details, or plot context necessary for the audience to understand the story. Now, let's define what examples of good or bad exposition actually look and sound like. We'll start with the bad. Bad exposition is clunky, unnatural, or excessive delivery of background information, like backstory, plot points, or world rules that break audience immersion. Some examples of bad exposition is as you know dialogue, the as you know Bob technique, where two characters discuss facts that they both already know, just for the audience's benefit.
This is why we're here. Unobtainium. Because this little gray rock sells for 20 million a kilo. That's the only reason. It's what pays for the whole party. It's what pays for your science. Comprendo?
You also have unnatural reminders. When a character reminds another of a traumatic or well-known past event purely for plot exposition for the audience, or it's something that those two characters should totally know.
Oh, what would Mom and Dad say?
I don't know. They're gone. They died when I was 3, remember?
Next is expert explanations. When experts are explaining basic fundamental concepts to each other that they would 100% already understand.
Because they're experts.
Earth's EM field shields us from the solar winds, which are a lethal blend of radioactive particles and microwaves.
Then we have the over-explained introduction, instantly announcing a character's full backstory or defining traits upon their introduction.
This katana cut all you in half with one sword stroke. I would advise not getting killed by her. Her sword traps the souls of its victims.
Then you have information-heavy news reports. When you rely too much on in-story news reports or broadcasts to deliver crucial background information.
Have steadily advanced across Europe. We've suffered millions of casualties.
All of humanity is at stake.
After 5 years, we finally have a victory.
Last, you have forced flashbacks. That's when you use long flashbacks to disrupt the narrative flow, to explain something that could have been shown in the present, in the film. Now let's look at what makes good exposition. How is that defined? Good exposition is defined as something that provides essential background information without stalling the story or feeling forced. Some examples include organic delivery. Information is revealed as the protagonist learns it. So you're not feeling talked down to as an audience member. You're being included in the dialogue because you are taking the space of the protagonist as they are being educated on something really crucial to understanding how to operate within the world they are in within the story.
Do you want to know what it is? It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth?
Next, we have the show don't tell visual storytelling method. This is when you are able to show something without dialogue or conversations between characters to help the audience understand background to a character or to understand important plot points or conflict that might be arising or helps elucidate something going on within the story. Last, you have clever in-world framing. That's when you have characters who are not explaining things to each other in a way that those two characters should already know, but instead you're able to understand the world a little bit more fully and the roles the characters play within it based on how they are operating within the world that you're seeing.
I'm telling it straight, I swear. Some guy in California, his name is Redfoot.
A gift from Mr. Soze.
Talk to me, Verbal.
What about Redfoot? Mr. Redfoot, you're not.
Ultimately, exposition is relative. Some people love the exact type of exposition that others absolutely detest. For example, Star Wars title cards. The title cards are a now infamous example of exposition because it is when is like a block of text that is explaining what you as an audience member need to understand about the story before the official film truly starts. And it's crawling across the screen, and that way you can understand all of the backstory and the world, and it is very helpful for understanding what's going on. But it also, with Star Wars at least, takes a solid 2 minutes. The exposition, however, there are people who find a lot of value in that exact kind of exposition, especially, exposition that can be considered very bad, like the title cards, because of the nostalgia associated with that film and their essentially community connection to that film. There are things about certain films that have had such intense cultural impact that every component of that film is now revered, regardless of if it qualifies as good or bad. There's also the topic of narration. Done badly, it can make it really hard for anyone who's watching the film to care about what's happening because the audience feels like their intelligence and ability to pick up cues is being questioned by the filmmakers.
To be a worker at Lakeview, one must be first an American of proven loyalty. The task of guarding projects like Lakeview is entrusted to the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
On the other hand, narration can really help. If you need insight into things that a character can't show you or discuss with another character without removing you from the experience of the story and being immersed within the story, then you can instead use well-placed narration without it being cliche.
With insomnia, nothing's real. Everything's far away. Everything's a copy of a copy of a copy.
So why does any of this matter? Exposition in film can be a litmus test for two things. First, attention of the audience. And second, the audience's ability to extrapolate information based on contextual clues. How does this connect to social media or neuromarketing? Let's start with the very first one, which is attention of the audience. May I introduce the two-screen rule? The two-screen rule is the assumption that many major Hollywood studios now have that films will not be watched in a theater and instead will be watched through a streaming service. And while those films are being watched, the audience will also be on their phone scrolling through social media platforms or the internet to some degree. This means that the audience's attention is going to be dramatically shorter than if they were fully engaged with the film, as they would have to be in a movie theater. There are now multiple studies that have actually studied this effect. According to the International Journal of Adolescence and Youth, it is now highly likely that there is a cognitive effect from consuming short-form video content, and it can lead to shortened attention spans. This has been studied significantly more in teens and young adults, but it shows up in all ages, and it actually has been around since the advent of the internet. Access to short-form video content is a lot easier because of the kinds of platforms that host it and the popularity of those platforms in recent years. Platforms like TikTok, Meta, Twitter, and even YouTube either exploded because of their use of short-form video content or their integration of short-form videos into their structure. And they did that to ensure that they would get more eyes and more attention from us, the populace. Faced with this rising competition in attention, time, and ultimately money, Hollywood has made a very specific decision. They've instituted the two-screen rule, where they've learned to account for this divided attention when they're writing scripts or greenlighting films or TV shows. As a result, you have more and more films and TV shows that spell out, sometimes repeatedly, information that anyone watching with full attention, undivided attention, would be able to pick up either at the very beginning or quickly throughout the show, or ascertain as the story progresses. Now, for anyone who's scrolling, they can look up, catch on to what is going on, and if/when they get distracted again, it's not going to completely remove their interest in the show or the movie that they're watching through their streaming service if they go back to their phone or the social medias or whatever it is. And they won't feel like they missed too much. So Hollywood have learned not to trust that the audience is paying attention. And you might think, well, I mean, maybe this only applies to like TV shows because those are the things that people stream the most, right? Movie theaters, you can't do that. It is a sacred covenant of movie theaters. You do not bring your phone out. But while that is true, movie theater attendance has actually dipped heavily, and it has had pretty far-reaching consequences on our consumption of media. So let's talk a little bit about the statistics. So movie theater attendance dipped mid-2000s, but it actually rose to its highest point in 2019, its highest point since 2002. And then it absolutely tanked because of the pandemic. And it has not regained those numbers. A lot of movie theaters have closed. There's an entire movie theater chain that has closed in Los Angeles, for example. ArcLight Cinemas, gone. But what's interesting is Gen Z attendance has actually been rising. Statistically, there's 41% of Gen Z in 2025 are going to the movie theaters at least 6.1 times a year, which is up from 31% in 2022 when they went 4.9%. It's actually the highest rise of any particular generation in going to the movie theaters in 2025. So the younger generations, which are the exact generations that are supposed to be the most heavily affected by the negative effects of short-form video content, are actually the ones who are actively choosing to go to movie theaters more often. Maybe this is pointing to a shift in cultural awareness about the harm that extended social media use can cause and short-form video content can have on our cognitive health. But only time will tell. It is no secret, though. Movie theaters have been losing cultural relevance, especially as once immovable institutions like Disney, Universal, Sony Pictures, which is Columbia, Paramount, and Warner Brothers, who are all over 100 years old, are getting challenged by streaming services. And it's important to talk about how things have shifted when it comes to people engaging in film content through movie theaters versus streaming, and how that relates to how movies are written and made, because there are significantly more effects on how art is made because of business decisions than we often like to discuss or acknowledge. But if we ignore it, then we can't do anything about it. This is one of those situations where we can use our own personal buying power to help sway decisions on a larger scale. Many older studios have tried to adjust to this shift shift towards streaming services by adapting their own streaming services or by creating these special deals with major streaming services. A lot of major Hollywood studios, especially Paramount, which has now been
combined
with Skydance, has bought or is trying to buy other major studios and is also trying to gain assets to their streaming rights and streaming services because the market has become so focused on streaming services instead of movie theaters. Netflix was going to try and buy Warner Brothers until Paramount stepped in and had an active goal to reduce the amount of how long films would be shown in movie theaters because Netflix CEO didn't feel as if movie theaters were relevant anymore, which is sad. It is actually quite sad. But at the same time, ticket and concession prices have skyrocketed. And that does affect whether or not people choose to go to a movie theater or if they want to stay home and watch a film or a TV show on a streaming service they're already paying for that maybe doesn't feel as immediately damaging to their wallet when you're paying once a month versus for every single individual show or movie. And that can majorly shift the kind of attention that is being given during the watching experience of that media. It's literally no secret that ticket prices and concession prices have skyrocketed. So the incentive to go see a film that you could watch at home has declined. Literally, we have the Minecraft movie at home. Newer releases have also begun streaming sooner and sooner after being released in theaters. It's almost a joke that if you see a movie is being streamed and it's supposed to still be in a movie theater, that it must not be doing well in the theater if it's already on the streaming platforms. But it actually serves the streaming platforms and the associated studios better if they can get as many eyes on that film as possible. And if it's easier to get eyes on the film by having it available on a streaming service, there's a higher likelihood that there will be more people watching that media, which again, in turn, means that there may be more people engaged with certain studios' productions. And that does ultimately translate to money, especially when it comes to subscriptions and ad revenue. So all that to say, the separation of attention that used to be in place when it came to going to a theater to watch movies or even watching TV at home pre-social media has changed because of our desire to have access to media without needing to buy the box set or to actually go physically to a theater to engage with new films. There is a very different culture around access to media than there was, especially pre-social media. So let's talk about the second part of the litmus test that exposition poses to the audience. And that is extrapolation of information from contextual clues. Perhaps due to the prevalence of screen time increasing with each new generation and the normalization of kids at younger and younger ages having access to iPads, phones, and computers, this shift in attention is a foregone conclusion. Even in school, most assignments have to be completed on a computer. There are even certain restrictions about turning in handwritten reports or work. Most things are computerized now, and it is more likely to have a younger person who has got better computer literacy and tech-savvy capability than an older person. We've also already established that, at the very least, short-form video content does have some scientific background to indicate that there is a likelihood that there could be cognitive effect in attention and our ability to pay attention to things if we take in too much short-form video content. But in general, just taking in a lot more screens doesn't necessarily mean that we are losing attention at a rapid rate just because we have more access to computers at younger ages. However, there is actually more to this than you may think. So why does having a shortened attention span affect being able to understand what you're watching in a film or being able to pick up contextual clues in general? According to a study by Dima Amso and Gaia Sarif, published in the Nature Reviews Neuroscience Neuroscience Edition, available through the National Library of Medicine's website, attention processes allow the selection of salient information over competing inputs, and visual attention can bias selection of information about objects, such as particular features or locations. Attention can also act to select goals for action from the contents of working memory. In all these cases, attention processes determine what information is selected for subsequent perception, action, learning, and memory, imposing a crucial processing bottleneck. So like, what does that actually mean though? Basically, what you notice, what grabs your attention, is what your brain processes first. It's not that other information doesn't translate, it's just that what you see and hear can have the most impact the fastest. Now, imagine you have multiple things competing for your attention at once. What are you going to pay attention to? Sure, there could be sounds, light, people, kids, and other distractions physically present when you're watching a movie or a TV show at home. But if we're talking about screens, you would probably think that you would be more likely to focus on the big screen versus the small one in your hand, right? Like, you'd watch a movie or a TV show with the big screen because there's lots of color, maybe a lot of sound, especially if you've got like a fancy surround sound system. But most TVs are generally farther away. They're like across a room or they're raised up high if it's in your bedroom. Either way, your head generally has to be raised. Your phone is normally very close. You can keep your head comfortably lowered. You can look at the phone that's actually in your hand. The entire sensation and sense of mental work is different. If you're watching short form video content, the colors, movement, and the action is actually moving a lot faster as well. So your brain is seeing a lot really quickly and it's responding very quickly. According to the Nielsen-Norman group, a key factor in capturing attention is pattern interruption. The brain notices changes in patterns, colors, and movement more than consistent elements. So
what does that mean?
Short form video content is engineered to grab your attention using emotive headlines or statements or actions that are playing out on the screen that really grab your attention. It's not just static, it's not just a consistent, longer story you're engaged in, which is what you would normally get in a TV show or a film. Even if action is happening on the screen, the sense of proximity to that action is going to be different, even just based on the physical proximity of you to your phone versus you to a screen that you're watching a movie or a TV show on. They go on to say, emotions drive engagement more powerfully than logic. Content that evokes feelings creates stronger neural connections and memory imprints. When users discover surprising or novel content, their brains release dopamine. This neurotransmitter creates feelings of pleasure and reward. Basically, we see a new thing, brain goes, yes, more please. Your brain is going to register those changes very differently than how you would if you're watching a movie. Because most movies are structured where their pacing is not as quick, as frantic. It's not every half second or a couple of seconds. If you had that much going on in a movie, every few seconds, things changing or shifting or big bright colors or big text coming on the screen, people would find it frantic and overwhelming. So largely, because most films are formatted for larger screens, it's going to really affect how you take in the media that you're watching. So if you're in a movie theater, the entire experience is supposed to ensure your attention is directed at the screen. Lights are lowered almost to complete darkness. Sound is surround. People aren't moving around or talking. It's a big no-no. You will get angry librarian level shh if you are talking to a movie. We all know this. Like I said, it's the sacred covenant of the movie theater. So it's really easy to fully focus your attention on what's going on the screen. You're taking everything in, and the entire structure of how that movie theater is set up is made to ensure that you really take the movie in and it feels larger than life because it's on a huge screen. You feel small, it feels big. It has a very strong cognitive effect on you as a person. It's why movie theaters are built the way that they are. And also the culture that surrounds them has developed in the way that it has. It has this sense of magic and impact. Your attention is wrapped. You're fully locked in. You're taking in so much more about what you're watching than when it's divided between the screen and your phone or whatever else might be going on at home. Like I said, when you're streaming a movie or a TV show or anything at home, there's a lot more competing for your attention. Your phone is literally right there. And on top of that, social media networks are are engineered to keep you on them. They are structured to ensure that you spend as much time on these social media networks as possible on those platforms. That's where the entire idea of the scroll comes from. The next video, it just plays automatically. It just keeps going. You barely even have to use your own hands when engaging with social media content, especially if you get on the scrolling reel after reel after reel on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, on any of those things. You can fully engage because you are pulled in. So basically, your brain doesn't get to rest. It doesn't get to pause. It doesn't get to decide if it wants to divest from what's going on your phone and shift its attention to something else. Because there is a constant new stimuli coming up and telling your brain, and as such your body, to react to it, to focus on it, that it is important information, whether or not it's just a cute cat video or a recipe or anything like that. It's how neuromarketing works. Neuromarketing, which is the integration of using neuroscience in marketing, was heavily used by social media companies when they were building the social media platforms or curating the types of content that are going to make it into the algorithm, as well as how the algorithm works. So that means that everything that is on a social media platform is structured to make it as easy as possible to stay on the platform for as long as possible. Everything from the way the colors look, the clarity of the image, and font are all based on what our brains are built to respond to the fastest and to value the most. It's engineered for addiction. It is using our instinctive neural wiring and responses to what we would and what we have developed over, generations of evolution to respond to, because it could be an indicator of danger or pleasure or positive. But whatever it is, our brains have certain colors that we respond to, certain lights that we respond to, even text and font. It is all engineered to affect how much we focus and to grab our focus. The timing of how a well-performing short-form video will do on a platform like TikTok or Instagram or Twitter, any of those places, is very specifically curated. There's a reason certain videos are more popular than others, and ones that are perhaps slower are often not as likely to perform as well. It is 100% because neuromarketers were engaged to figure out how to get the most amount of people, the most invested in one singular space for as long as possible, which is pretty tough. People have a lot of different interests, a lot of different things that actually engage them. But if you can nail down a formula for how our brains instinctively respond to the stimuli of an experience, then it doesn't always matter what's on the screen. Your brain just knows it needs to focus on it. As a result, we have a much harder time keeping our hands off of our phones when there isn't a social pressure to do so, like in a movie theater. Over time, this affects how our brains are able to even process information. When information isn't packaged the way that it is on social media or through short-form video content, brains that are heavily impacted by social media and short-form video content are going to have a lot harder time maintaining focus. And they're going to have a lot harder time maintaining attention, the type of attention that you would need to find a deeper meaning in film, TV shows, media that is visual, but it can extrapolate to even farther reaches and other kinds of art, media, and interactions, but we're specifically talking about film and TV shows today. Essentially, it can affect one's ability because your attention span is shorter, and it is also more likely to be divided because your attention span is shorter. So it's going to be a lot harder to take in media and process it enough to pick up context clues or hints that can make a really engaging piece of cinema and that you would really need to care on a deeper level without having to have the story explained to you multiple times or various relationships between characters explained to you multiple times, and possibly in a way that is a little bit ham-fisted, because they're expecting, and the Hollywood studios and the scripts that are being greenlit are expecting that you're not paying attention. They don't trust that you're paying attention. They don't trust that you're going to pick up on those cues. there's less cognitive incentive to do so. This is where the entire idea that younger generations are ruining exposition in film comes from. Because Hollywood studios are trying to keep up with the competition from streaming services and are writing their scripts in a way that's more likely to keep your interest if you have a divided attention, if the audience's attention is divided between multiple forms of media or multiple things. So if you are paying attention, and you're more accustomed to watching a film without having a phone in your hand or having things repeatedly spelled out for you through clunky exposition or just an overuse of exposition,
it can be really, really frustrating.
You more than likely want the story and you want it to make sense in a way that doesn't make you feel stupid. Now, I think it's also really important to talk about this generational difference as well when it comes to access, because older generations did have a very different structure when it came to accessing their favorite forms of media. They either had to physically go to a theater to see the film, if it was a film, or they had to wait for the TV show to come out week after week. Now, if it was a film and they really loved it and they saw it in the theater, they had to wait for it to come out in physical form, like the VHS or DVDs. There was no alternative. You just had to wait because you couldn't find things on the internet. There were no easy workarounds to those things, but especially before the internet, that was it. You had to wait for physical media of some kind. Even if it was a bootleg copy, you still had to wait for physical media of some kind. And a bootleg copy used to mean somebody had snuck a camera into the movie theater and recorded it and then was selling physical copies. That's what bootleg used to mean. If you couldn't get your hands on that, that was it. On the other hand, if it came to TV shows and they were airing once a week, if you missed the time that the show was airing, you couldn't rewind. You couldn't go back. You couldn't do any of those things. You missed it. The structure of TV shows were very different because they had commercial breaks built into how the TV show worked. If you wanted to make sure you didn't miss anything important in the show, if you wanted to get snacks or water or use the bathroom, whatever it was, you had to wait until the commercial break. So it's very, very different to now where you can pause a show and go do whatever you need to. The other thing about how people used to have access to TV shows at the very least was if you missed an episode of a TV show, they weren't going to re-show that episode. Not as long as the show was still airing new episodes. Every week you would get a new episode and you had to make it on time for that episode and that was it. But if you missed something, the next episode wasn't going to cover what you missed last week. So if it's a story that's sequential, oh well. You missed it. If you're lucky, you might be able to get a recap at the beginning of the episode that would maybe help highlight or explain certain things that were happening in past episodes that could help you prepare for what might be happening in this episode, or that might give you hints or clues about what to expect in the coming episode. But that was it. If you totally missed your episodes, or say you wanted to see the TV show that you really liked again, then you had one option. Well, you had two options. It was either you bought the box set, which would include all of the episodes of a particular season, or you would wait for reruns where they may rerun the entire series on TV, and you still had to make sure you were there at the right time to see those episodes, or else you would miss it all over again. That was only if the show was popular enough to get the airtime for a rerun. So another thing too is that TV shows used to be structured with the assumption that at every single week there may be new viewers jumping in who have no idea what's happened up until this point when the show is airing. And that is where you introduce the opening credits scene that often, depending on the type of show that you were watching, could have a lengthy bit of exposition during those opening credits. So there were forms of exposition that could even be considered art forms, especially when they were done well. And they could include as well recaps of previous episodes, but they would generally just operate to help get everybody up to speed. It was basically the bullet points of what you needed to know about the series to be able to care about the characters or the story or understand the world. A little bit like Star Wars title cards. Sometimes it did include a lot of text, sometimes it included narration, sometimes it included scenes one after another to help you understand who was who. Now this is where the positives from streaming services come in, because because it's both viewed with nostalgia, but also could be quite frustrating to have grown up at a time period where you didn't have access to streaming services and you didn't have access to media on demand. So now, because we do have streaming services, you can access many of those older forms of media without having to deal with any of those hurdles. And the generations that used to have to wait to rewatch even one episode of a series could rewatch the entire series now, one after the next, if they wanted to. And on top of that, younger generations can discover older forms of movies or TV shows and be introduced to the timing and pacing of older forms of media that have become less popular as Hollywood studios have tried to shift their timing and their structure to compete with social media structure. With streaming services, the biggest hurdle is subscription fees, or needing to pay individually for movies or TV episodes on top of a subscription for older like shows or shows that are not seen as popular. So for a streaming service, it's absolutely a win-win situation. Everyone can get what they want. But when it comes to newer media, there's a lot more incentive to shift how movies and TV shows are written so they can attain the subscriptions and the watch time that they would really need of a growing audience whose attention is heavily divided. Thus, exposition in film and TV has had to change. And they had to do that in order to keep up. Things need to be explained a lot faster, a lot more often, and with less nuance. Because you have to be able to capture the widest amount of people whose attention is going to be divided. So what can we do about this? As Gen Z has already demonstrated with movie theater attendance, what's interesting is there is a growing response to not engaging with media that utilizes these tactics. And instead, returning to movie theaters to engage with films that way, or when watching films or watching TV on streaming services, actively focusing on the film or the TV show, and then only using social media in regards to that afterwards in order to have a conversation about the media that you have taken in or watched. And that could actually be really, really positive, because what that does is it gives a lot more power to the audience to hold studios accountable using social media, which obviously we can see they pay a lot of attention to when it comes to ensuring that they are actually going to be casting actors of all racial backgrounds, and also ensuring that different stories are represented and showing that there is actually an audience for areas of film or TV that are often seen as not very bankable or less likely to get attention. I mean, Heated Rivalry is an interesting exploration of that, because a lot of queer media isn't, until recently, was not seen as financially viable, so studios didn't want to invest in it. And they didn't want to tell queer stories outside of what was comfortable for heteronormative mindsets, and maybe a little scintillating, using unhealthy stereotypes. On top of that, you also now have a lot more representation of historically underrepresented groups in media, and that is largely because we have the opportunity of using social media and even short form video content as a soundboard and a form of social accountability for the studios that are now making the media we take in. So we can perhaps have more of a conversation about how exposition in film is changing. I personally feel like I have noticed that things have shifted a little bit as more people have made posts, articles, comments, and video essays about this phenomenon. If you're at all worried about the state of media at present, this is maybe one of those situations where you can do something about it in a actionable way by making commentary and ensuring that your voice does get heard when it comes to dissecting pieces of media that are getting a lot of social support or financial support from major Hollywood studios. And maybe we as a populace can shift the negative to something a little bit more empowering. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please don't forget to subscribe so you can help a new creator like me find her footing. If there's any topics you would like me to discuss in future videos, then let me know. Drop it in the comments below. All right, thank you so much and have a good day. Food sped? Spoon Spoon fed. Everything spoon fed to them. Wait, what?